Welcome back, everybody, to another GameCast thing. This time it's going to be a breakdown / impressions of the new Pokemon Sword and Shield Direct information that we got yesterday. And it's quite exciting, I believe. And let's just go through it all in lovely, crushing detail. I want to start by talking about the world and that this is set in. It's set in the Galar region, which is an interesting choice of name. It's supposed to be gallant, I should imagine, because gallantry and Britishisms and, you know, the things that Brexiteers think Britain still is and isn't. Politics, let's not do that. Anyway, yes, it is supposed to be based on England, the country in which I reside, and I do very much like the what they've done in terms of theming the world around that. For instance, the cities, the architecture within the cities, and even the towns really does suit the kind of not Britain as a whole, but it suits what the internationally associated image of Britain is. So you have, you know, your grand architecture in the cities, and the towns, it's sort of more cottagey style places. Let's just hope they've not made a council estate town, because that would not be very fun at all. You'll notice, just by the way, that I'm not putting video on this because Nintendo are Nintendo and I don't want to have to deal with them being them. But on the topic though, let's get back to the world, and it does feel a lot more dynamic in terms of, you know, just how alive the world feels. You feel in a lot of the in the previous Pokemon games, even some of the most recent ones, the world seems very static. It doesn't feel very alive and changing, mostly because, you know, they couldn't do it, especially on the older games. They really couldn't do very much, and this feels so much more alive, and I love it. I love how much seems to be going on in the towns and cities to make the world feel that it's actually doing something. One thing that will help that as well is in certain areas, particularly the Wild Zone, which we'll get back onto in a minute, you actually have camera control. You'll be able to actually move the camera around the 3D space, and this will be the first Pokemon game to do that, full stop, really. The last 3D Pokemon main type games were XD and Colosseum, and they still had fixed camera positions, really. Like, they moved around a bit dynamically with you, but 90% of the time it was just, you know, fixed into one axis. So they felt like very static games in terms of how, I don't know, it'll just help the world feel more real, I think. But let's go back to the Wild Zone. I'm not a fan of the name. I think that's a bit dumb. And it's the one area where I don't think they've represented Britain very well, because there's a desert zone. And let me tell you, as a resident of the UK, there is no desert zone, except maybe Hull. But that's a desert in a different sense of the word. I think, as a whole, I like it. I like the idea of it. I think they're going to be using a sort of random number generator based on the time of day and that to work out how the weather will be in this zone, because it changes variously over the course of the day. So you could be in a deserty type zone at one point of the day, or a frosty, snow-covered zone another time of the day, which I quite like. I think that's a really interesting way of utilising the world and what you can do with it. I get that it can kind of represent that Britain's changing climates, like very changeable weather in a way, but it's not that changeable. I'll level with you guys. Still, I do like the fact they've retained in the Wild Zone, at least, a thing that I liked from Pokemon Go, where they had Pokemon wandering around. Whether or not these are ones you can interact with properly, or if they're just there as dressing almost, I don't know, but I would like to be able to actually go into battle with them or whatever else. I think that's an interesting addition that they've brought over from Let's Go, that was one of the things I really liked about the game, and it really helped build the world a lot more to me. It felt more living because you could actually see things moving around rather than just, you know, wander around a patch of grass and suddenly an encounter. Another thing that I do like about the world, this is a particular thing that they brought over from British life, and it's the prevalence of sports. Now, I'm not really a sports person myself, but this country as a whole loves its sport, particularly football. And the way they've kind of carried this over is they've made the gyms basically into sports stadiums, and like Pokemon battles are seen as football is over here. Basically, it's this big public event and people go to see it. I do quite like the way that they've adapted this in. A lot of the times in the older games, the gyms were they were a lot more private places, and it was just like you against the train. But then this is like the eyes of the world are upon you, or the eyes of the region. They're even broadcast the gym battles on their televisions, which I think that's a really interesting way of bringing British life over into that world. That's definitely something that the British Pokemon people would do. So I like that in particular. Gym battles, though, brings us on to the new, let's call it the new gimmick, and it's, because it is a gimmick, it's called Dynamax this time, which I weird name. Basically, you can supersize your Pokemon for 3 turns in a battle, once per battle, and it does like more damage and can take more damage. I don't know how I feel about this. This feels very much like Z moves and Mega Evolutions. They're a bit of a gimmick. It just feels like a big gimmick, to be honest, more than anything. And the gym leaders will have 1 Dynamax Pokemon that they will all use per battle. One thing they are doing with the Dynamax that I do quite like, though, is they're bringing across a new multiplayer element. So this time, instead of just being able to battle or trade with your multiplayer, there are certain areas in the wild zone where you're actually able to enter with multiple real people, either locally or online, into what are effectively raids from Pokemon Go, but more Pokemon battle style. I like that they've taken the inspiration from Pokemon Go, which was this super successful thing that we just didn't expect to be quite as successful as it is, and just plonked it into into an actual game, and they've worked with it. I kind of like that with these games they're taking what's worked from the side games and gone, hey, maybe we can incorporate these things into the mainline games, and I think they hopefully seem to be doing quite a good job of it. Let's talk a little bit, though, about the characters that we've been introduced to in the games. We've been told the professor's name. We've got Professor Magnolia and her assistant Sonia. I quite like Sonia's design. Very sort of casual assistant in a way, casual research assistant. It works with what is in the game. Very much reminds me of Bianca from Black 2 and White 2. She was one of the rivals in the first set in Black and White, and then she became Professor Thingy's assistant in Black 2 and White 2. And then Professor Magnolia reminds me of the Professor from that gen, crossed with Professor Oak. She's sort of a wise old lady. I quite like her design as well. I think it's quite cool. She's got a cane. I do like a good cane. That sounded weird. Anyway, we've been introduced to the champion as well. The champion is called Leon. I know that's a westernized name. I don't know if they're going to be using that in Japan, but that is certainly the name in the West, and I'm not a huge fan of it. It seems a bit too plain almost. That said, there was a champion called Steven, which is equally plain, and he is actually my favourite champion, so maybe I'm just talking out of my arse. Your rival is actually going to be the champion's brother in this instance, who is called Hop, which is a bit weird. I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit weird. So you got Leon and Hop. Those parents didn't like that second child, did they? I don't know. I think that's a weird choice, but okay, go for it. But let's move on to the Pokemon. So we have the 3 we were introduced to before, the starters: Sobble, Scorbunny, and Grookey. Probably going to pick Sobble personally. That looks like my favourite out of the 3. But we will see what happens when the evolutions are revealed. The new ones, though, we have several new ones to go through. We have Gossifleur, who is... it's a flower Pokemon, and the name's Gossamer, and flower in French is Gossamer as a type of flower. So it works with their naming system, but I don't know. It reminds me of the Floette line from Generation 6. I like it to a point, but maybe, I don't know, it feels like they're doing quite a lot of these things where it's just, hey, we've got a grass Pokemon, what should we do with it? Floral design. Yeah, we've got quite a few of those now. But we've seen Gossifleur's evolution as well, because they will be evolving into Eldegoss. Bit weird, so Elderflower and Gossamer, I should imagine, is the etymology there. And weirdly, Eldegoss looks a bit like a dandelion that has seeded. It's like a dandelion clock and has seeds on it. It's a strange design. Again, they're going for the floral thing. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of this one personally, but it's fine. We've also got Wooloo, which is a sheep. Not much else to say about it. That they value its fur as a commodity, and they use it in textiles, and it's a normal type. It's a sheep. That's about all there is to say on the matter, to be honest. We've also got Dreadnought. Now, I quite like the design for Dreadnought. It's like a more angular Torterra. A bit smaller as well, obviously, but it's like I think it's quite cool. I like it. So think Torterra, but with more angles and blue. Can't remember if they gave us the typing. I think it might have been Steel. I might be wrong. Yes, I do like the design for Dreadnought. I think it's quite cool. It's quite interesting, and it's apparently got a very powerful bite that can bite through rocks, which a lot of things in this world seem to do, and yet humans seem to be the dominant life form somehow. Go figure. Finally, on the non-legendary front, we have Corviknight, which the name I'm ambivalent on. We've got Corvi, as in Corvinus, Corvus, which is crow, and Knight, as in knight in shining armor. So it is a flying steel type. A lot of people are thinking, oh, it should be flying dark, but being a knight, like knight in shining armor, kind of makes the steel make more sense for me. As much as, Corvus based on a crow, kind of looks a bit like it could be a dark type. That'd be quite a nice non-sequitur. I think it's an interesting design. I do love it. One thing I do quite like, though, it's supposed to be this quite intimidating looking Pokemon, and in this world it's being used as a taxi service because it takes you to towns you've already visited. Weirdly, this terrifying thing turns up and takes you to another town, and they've actually dressed up little sort of taxi rank type things with a Corviknight on it. I like that little detail. I think that's actually quite cute. Those are the new non-legendary Pokemon. I don't like all of them. I'm not a huge fan of Gossifleur and Eldegoss, but I do quite like Corviknight. I think that's quite a fun design. But let's talk about the legendaries. Now, we have Zacian. I'm going to keep pronouncing that wrong because it's a ball-ache of a name. And Zamazenta. Now, those are very Japanese-style names, and I should imagine that they are the Japanese names and they just haven't made a more westernized version, which is fine. They're welcome to do that. I feel like, though, that the names are a bit of a... They don't roll off the tongue for a Western or English-speaking audience as much because of the way that our language is built compared to the Japanese language. That's speaking as someone who's learning Japanese. Oh boy, can be a bit of a pain. But let's talk about the design, though. And I am very mixed on this. I think their design overall, it doesn't look bad, but they're ripping off a Dark Souls boss with one of them. Really, honestly, that is technically ripping off a Dark Souls boss because it's a dog with a sword in its mouth. And B, I feel like we have a lot of dog-type legendaries already. We have, you have with 3 legendary beasts. We have Entei, Raikou, and Suicune. And we have Terrakion, Cobalion, and Virizion. I think that's how they're all pronounced. I probably butchered it. But we have those 6 already dog-shaped sort of legendaries. I don't feel like we need any more of those, but that's what we've been given. So, I don't know. I don't hate the design, but I also feel like it's something we've seen a lot of times before. But yeah, they're fine. They're completely fine. Nonetheless, though, I am still pretty damn hyped for the release of Pokemon Sword and Shield. We have a release date of November 15th, and they have confirmed that you will be able to pre-order a double pack containing both of the games, which is something I will definitely be doing as a collector of this franchise. But if I missed anything, do please let me know in the comments and let me know what you think of the information that we've been given. Are you excited for Pokemon Sword and Shield? Are you more excited than you were? Are you less excited? I'm personally still pretty damn excited. I'm really looking forward to these games. I hope they are good. But that is it from me. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time for another thing.